You're listening to WLPN LP Chicago, 105.5 FM, Lumpen Radio, Bridgeport. It's December 14th, 2017, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to a very professionally produced episode of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Quinn, coming to you once again from the Co-Prosperity Sphere here in Bridgeport, Chicago. Thanks, as always, to Lumpen Radio for having us on, and thanks to fearless leaders Logan Bay and Jamie Trecker, and special show producer Jamie Trecker back on. Has me a little bit on edge, just with the professional nature of things. Obviously, he has forgotten how we prefer to run this thing, but okay, I'll just have to, figure it out as I go. But I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in over the airwaves, 105.5 FM, Lumpen Radio, WLPN. Thank you. Or if you're listening via the online versions of that on TuneIn Radio or wherever that is that you may get your radio streaming. Thank you for tuning in. If you are listening live, you should pop over to the live chat room, which is at tlk.io/WLPN. I have a feeling we may have a special pseudo-celebrity, B-list celebrity host in the chat room tonight, so you guys can have some fun trolling us and stuff like that, as you guys like to do. So if you are listening live, hop on over to the chat room and join in the fun. If you're listening via iTunes or a podcast or anything like that, thank you as well. Maybe listen live next time. I mean, doesn't matter to me. People seem to like to chat it up and make fun of us in person. They kind of bond over ridiculing me, which is good. I like that I bring that enjoyment to people's lives. I'll take it any way I can get it. For those of you listening for the first time and wondering what the heck you're listening to, let me just go over a little bit about the show, the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. Basically, the goal of this show is to open up a window into how the people making, selling, marketing, and facilitating the beer getting into your glass feel about the topics that are a part of their everyday lives. Many of my greatest beer experiences have been talking about beer while sharing beer with people whose opinions I respect and admire. And it's these experiences that I try to recreate with the Insiders Roundtable. Basically, people just kind of sitting around talking about beer, talking about what they do and what they're passionate about. So with that, I will introduce my guests. But first, I want to mention that all the opinions of my guests are solely their own opinions and not affiliated with any other entity that they may otherwise be associated with. Certainly not Lumpen Radio. Definitely not Lumpen Radio. And, nowhere else as well. I'll throw the Beer Temple in there. So don't go blaming Lumpen Radio for something that, Edmar is inevitably going to say. Not that he's on, but you guys know he will be on. Yeah. What do you
mean? I'm not on right now?
Well, you are. I mean, people expect you to jump on whether you're. So we usually go on social media and say who's going to be on, and I think people assume that whether or not you're actually listed as a guest, you will make an unscheduled appearance or a scheduled appearance. But it's perfect because we introduce people in order of seniority being how many times they've been on the show, and as we all
scheduled.
No, we've said before, scheduled and unscheduled doesn't matter, which is why you are so far in front of everyone. Yep. If it was scheduled, it might be a little tighter of a race. you'd probably still be in the lead, mate, probably. But unscheduled, we decided it was scheduled or unscheduled. And, I mean, really, it's
it's great. It's great to be here, Chris. It's been a while. You know? I really appreciate you inviting me to not be on tonight.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You were on last week for the Talkin' Strami show, right?
No, I was on the Dust Brothers
The Dust
show.
Hours.
The Dust Hour, yeah. So
Still haven't
different
listened to the
show.
whole thing.
Different beer show.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. It was interesting to learn that they had been doing this for a long time.
About
but it was
5 years.
Yeah, the first time they ever decided to go on the air with it.
Yeah. They often do the show here with the lights off in the studio and just sit here and talk about Dust for hours. Mm-hmm. And they finally...
Whoops, we forgot yet
turn the-
again that
turn the microphone on.
the mics weren't on.
Yeah.
You know, we've been doing this.
Yeah.
So, but...
That's why there's been a couple of, whenever weekly, you'll hear silence over the airwaves on 105.5 FM, and it's usually the Dust Brothers show.
I always like when an inside joke is taken, starts to get a little old, and then it's just
Bam.
driven into the ground for another, okay, we've got 15 more minutes of this.
Yeah.
I personally was listening to the first part of the show and was like, okay, they're going to keep going with it. And I was telling Doug, another one of our guests tonight.
Is this Eric and Mike we're talking about?
I mean,
Yeah.
don't know who those are.
I don't
Yeah.
know. The Dust Brothers, they're just called
Buster and Dusty,
Buster
I
and
think
Dusty.
is what they go
Buster
by.
and
Dusty,
Yeah. But anyway, thanks for being on. Ed, anything new with you?
Nothing. Nothing's new.
Okay. My next guest is Mr. Doug Valicki, a.k.a. the Beer Cruncher, a.k.a. the Beer Aficionado. Many gnomes to beer for you as well, like one of the Dust Brothers. What's new with you, man? How are you?
Good. Not a whole lot. Did a little traveling lately. Went to Northern California for Thanksgiving and visited a couple breweries there. That's where my wife's family lives, so we go there probably twice a year. Went to the Rare Barrel for the first time in Berkeley, which was really nice.
Oh, cool.
And didn't get to spend very much time there, just had time for one beer, but got to check out the place and really awesome scene there. Great. Berkeley's just a really cool town. Love going there. And then I went to another one I went to three. I went to Moonraker, which is a brand new one and a very, focused on all the latest trends, all hazy beer, that kind of brewery. Then literally went across the street to the exact opposite kind of brewery, which was Knee Deep. Who's been around, maybe like 8 to 10 years.
Dr. Hoptagon or something they do, or
the
hopologist.
Yeah, I went there.
Like that.
It was really interesting.
Some sort of hop pun.
Both places completely packed. You could tell a different type of fan at each, and it was just really funny to literally walk across the street and just see two different types of beer fans that
who kind of don't intersect.
We're going there for two different reasons, but it was fun. Had a great time out there.
Very cool. And then Moonraker, is that solely named after? Not that you would know.
James Bond.
Yeah, I mean, is a Moonraker something else other than?
I don't really know their background or story. I just had heard good things, and it was right by another brewery, so went there. It's in Auburn, California, which is
we're a James Bond themed craft brewery. So
it's not that. Yeah.
It's I'm sure there's a big overlap there.
Thunderball Brewing is right down the street.
Exactly. Dr. No. Yeah. I mean, let's keep it rolling. Carl Clockers.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very
I
good,
just
thank
broke
you.
a pen. What's new with you? I think there is some pretty big things that are new with you, right?
Yeah. So something that's been, I guess, gestating, for lack of a better word, for a couple years now is finally out in the world. The book that I have been working on for quite some time about all things Chicago beer is finally in physical form and shipping in people's hands, and Beer Temple's in it, and Revolution's obviously in it, and Half Acre's in it,
and it's
Mars
all written.
is in it, and lots of other places are in it too.
What's it called?
It's called Beer Lovers Chicago.
Okay, and it's written in. You wrote it in like iambic pentameter.
Correct.
Cool.
Yes.
Nice.
Written in runic. So it took a while to translate it. But I wanted to be true and hardcore.
Right.
And that's the way that things are done.
Yeah.
So,
well, nice. I'm glad somebody still cares.
Do you have a copy here?
yeah. Actually, I do. Hang on a second.
Oh, there you go.
I can prove it.
I can prove it. I'm not just saying it. Well, thanks for coming on. And is Brian there? You there, Brian? Brian Roth? No? Is Brian there, Jamie? Have we called Brian yet? Oh, he's there. Are you there? Oh, there you are.
Am I here?
We just couldn't hear you. Now,
I am here.
You're on the phone, which is really a shame because we can't see your Deep V, which I'm sure you're wearing. Or are you even close? Do you have a top on? Or are you topless this week?
I'm keeping it traditional just for you guys. That Deep V is on.
Yeah. Above or below the navel? How low does it cut?
Just all the way to my waist. Just that
it's
just thins out right all the way down.
Because it's different.
Really
Usually,
boring.
everyone
Yeah.
only hears you, but we actually usually can see you as well, and we get to see the. It's basically like the.
For the best.
Yeah. It's. It's. I forget the name of the. Whatever. Sacha Baron Cohen.
The ratio of times that I've been lucky enough to join you guys on the show, of how often the conversation with me has started with how is to referencing the V-neck, has set a wonderful standard for my appearances.
Yeah. Well, people have come to expect it. I also like that people come to expect it when they listen to the show only, which is 99.99% of the people who listen to the show. Everyone who literally isn't in the studio, and still talk about deep V-neck shirts. So you've really...
It's a movement.
Yeah, it's a movement. I also, let's just get out of the way now. I like to kind of get bad news out of the way and condolences, but, man, sorry about that brutal loss to an unranked Boston College team for your Duke Blue Devils. That really hurt,
Someone's
man.
got to lose in every game. That's all right.
Yeah, yep. I'm sure Villanova will lose eventually. We'll see. Anyway, moving on, we've got Gabriel Magliaro. Is that right?
You did it.
Okay, Magliaro of Half Acre. Thanks for coming back, Gabriel. It's been a while. How long's it been?
Once a year, it's
Okay. Been about a year.
Yeah, I circle back every 365 days.
Okay, so you keep tabs then.
Yeah, I have a log at home.
Good. Of everything or just this show?
No, of everything, and also this show.
Okay. A lot's new with you, I would think, in the past year. I would hope something's new. What's going on with you?
Well, I don't know. We just opened our tap room at our newer brewery, so that's probably the most quantifiable thing that's different with us.
Super cool space. I dig it.
Yeah.
And great food. The food. So the food at your old place or your original place is really good. I thought you guys killed it there, and I'm not knocking it in any way, but the food at this new place I think it's the best brew pub food I've ever had. Honestly.
Well, that's a ringing endorsement. Appreciate you saying that. Yeah, we're excited about it.
Now, give me some of that extra. No, I'm kidding. No, sorry.
Payment comes later.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's a new addition and something that we're still working on, and certainly visually, but it's open and people can come there and drink beer and eat food. So that's a big deal for us. And then just progress as usual, the shit that we work on all the time, and things are well.
Oh, we're on the radio.
The stuff that
Yeah.
we work
20
on.
minutes?
Yeah.
Made it 20 minutes, roughly? Give you 30?
13 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah,
not bad.
13 minutes.
Yeah.
So thanks, Gabriel.
That'll be the one time,
Yeah, sure it will.
most likely.
No, it's a super cool space, and one of your wait staff is a avid Philadelphia Eagles fan. So, I have to fully endorse that as well.
There's a number of them. Actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, this guy was wearing like full green Eagles hat, everything. I was there with my daughter, and she was like, "Hey, Eagles!" And I was like, "That's
There you
right,
go.
yeah." So that's good. Oh, wait, you're from?
Yeah, everyone that
yeah.
I grew up with are Eagles fans.
That's right. Cool. I forgot about that. All right, I gotta go there more often now. Do you? Well, I was gonna start asking if you show Eagles games and stuff there.
We
but I don't
don't.
think people really care.
Don't get your hopes up.
I don't. We don't at my place either, but I would kind of like it if we did. Anyway, thanks for coming back, man.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And keeping track of your, how long it's been.
log.
The log. Yeah, thanks for keeping the log going. So we've got a whole bunch of people. So let's quickly see if there's anything that people have been excited about beer-wise lately. Anything for you, Carl?
I saw recently that you checked out one of the final days of the Brauhaus, which is a place that is
Monday was her last day.
near and dear to my heart. I also have long been a patron and fan of the Hooten Bar directly across the street.
Yeah.
Just there the other night, and I don't know if you can think of a better place to have like a Kostritzer or something like that, but it's definitely that season. Kostritzer and Herder Morkel, all those nice, dark, easily drinkable beers. Yeah, and since the Brauhaus is gone now, the places that you can go to reliably have a good selection of German beer is it wasn't big to begin with, but probably 20% smaller at this point, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, for people who aren't aware, the Chicago Brauhaus was a Chicago, I would say, a beer institution. It was kind of a German beer hall themed restaurant, and they had live entertainment 7 days a week, and it really sucked to see them close.
It was a really special place, and it's been 5 decades that it had been around. I mean, it was a real anchor of the community. So,
and we were talking about, I was there on the second to last night, and we were kind of just asking the question of, is it better to like hand it off to somebody else, because they were still doing good business. It sounded like they decided they wanted to close. And do you shut it down, or do you sell it so somebody else can kind of keep this thing going, if maybe in their own way, or do you just kind of let it, just send it out to pasture? And I don't know. It's sad to see it go when it could have kept going, but at the same time, I guess all things kind of must come to an end. So
yeah,
anyway.
It was never one of those places that was really totally driven by one singular personality. Like, I know that the brothers
Goaty
in charge were
okay,
fair.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I can't imagine the Brauhaus without Goaty. I feel like they just didn't want to let anybody else be that person for that place, which I completely understand.
Yeah,
and I'm glad I had the opportunity to appreciate more than my fair share of boots of beer. At the Brauhaus.
Yeah. Very cool. I know this is irrelevant to most of the people out there, but I don't care. Quick Goaty story. They called him he's the guy who was like the German band
Austrian
leader.
Elvis, right? Yeah.
Or the Austrian Larry Bird is what I had heard him called.
That's a new one.
Yeah. First time I ever went in there, he opened his set with "My Way" by Frank Sinatra, which I thought was the most amazing opening song ever, which is basically everybody's closing song. This dude opened with it. I was like, all right, I'm in. I like this guy. So yeah. Gabriel, anything that you've had lately that you've dug?
I've been drinking a lot of Oxbow beer because Tim was in town, and he sent out a bunch of beer. I'm a big fan of theirs and how they approach making beer. And I was drinking a Pils from St. Arnold yesterday. They mailed us some beer.
Oh, yeah?
We had this like BrauCon summit at our brewery, so everybody with BrauCon brew houses flew in, and we talked about BrauCons, and they are one, and they sent us a bunch of beer, and they had a really nice Saaz focused Pils that I enjoyed a lot. Some Fonta Flora beers, got a bunch of those in our cooler right now. Been enjoying all that.
Very cool. I think we have some scratch beer that I put in there too. Speaking of like foraged and stuff.
Sure.
Totally with you on Oxbow. I think those guys are just doing farmhouse, that kind of rustic style saison, as well as anyone. And yeah, Tim's a super nice guy. Doug, anything for you?
Yeah, I had lunch. Lucky enough to have lunch at Longman and Eagle yesterday, and they had. This is a beer that's been mentioned on this show, I think, a bunch of times. But the newest Laponic Distortion from Firestone Walker, and I had the first, I don't know, maybe 4 of those. I think this was the 7th one, and I think I'd missed the last few, so I ordered that, and that's just like it was so flavorful but clean, and it really just stood out as a simple but awesome beer. I was pretty excited by that one. My only complaint about those is like with a rotating hop series type beer, I like to learn a little bit, and I never know like what the hops. They don't really.
That's on purpose, from what I've heard. Yeah,
they don't tell you a whole much about it. So I always enjoy them, but I never feel like I know what I'm getting, or I'm trying to like learn a little bit more about what hops I'm picking up, and you don't get a lot of information there. But man, I love drinking those.
Sometimes I think they just go with like what region of the world they're from, even. So.
Yeah, it's not like they don't describe it, but they won't tell you like the hop names or anything like that.
I think that is very much intentional. Yeah. How about you, Brian? Anything that you've been sipping on that you've liked?
Yeah, I was lucky to get a few cans and a bottle from Two Roads up in Connecticut.
Yeah.
We don't have them here in North Carolina right now, but I've long heard wonderful things about Phil Markowski, their brewer, and so I was able to try a couple of beers that he had his thumbprint on, and there was a specialty. It was essentially a barrel-aged farmhouse beer called Country Funk, which will probably be expanded a little bit as they open up a dedicated barrel facility. But it was just a red wine barrel saison that was just fantastic, really, really good, and I was happy to be able to try a couple other beers too. That a coffee stout espressway, which was really enjoyable too. So I look forward to them getting down to North Carolina at some point, because I will definitely be a repeat customer.
Cool. Yeah, he was Phil Markowski was the guy who kind of like wrote the book on. Speaking of beer books,
Literally.
on saison, right, and farmhouse ale, and he was at Southampton, right, and Southampton's Bière de Garde and their saison were kind of archetypes for the saisons that were made for decades. Anything for you, Ed?
Last week was the International Independent World Karaoke Championships.
Oh yeah, I'd heard about that.
And it was very crowded, 3 days in a row. Hundreds and
you
hundreds.
went? You went to
I was there.
Did you crush, Ed? Did you crush?
I was KJing the second night. And Pipeworks was a sponsor, and they dropped off a bunch of beer.
Oh, it was here.
Yeah.
I thought it was in Zurich.
No, it was
It's
in
here
Zurich
this
last year.
Yeah.
It's in Chicago this year.
Okay.
So I've been drinking up all their beer in the last 3 days since the festival's
Pipeworks.
been over. And, of course, drinking low fills from the brewery. But, yeah, also drinking a lot of tea. A lot of weird tea from Spirit Tea.
Spirit tea? Like the
really
company is called Spirit?
Yeah, very intense, like single origin tea that's been fermented naturally in the sun in Taiwan and goes through some bizarro process, and you could chew on it and eat it like it's a Cheeto.
Tea.
Tea.
Okay. That's the first, I think, tea that's been brought up on that segment. So that's cool.
I'm a Club Monte super fan.
Oh,
I mean, when I was in Zurich a few years ago for the championships, where I picked it up, the Club Monte.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. That's good. Who did somebody win the karaoke jam thing?
Dozens of people won awards, Chris.
Everyone came away a winner.
Many people won awards.
I wanted to talk about so for me, I was in Belgium, and the Delacenne beers are just so darn good. They're good here, but they are so good in Belgium. Just these really nice, light, flavorful, low alcohol, crushable beers to.
You brought
quote
us all some, right?
Pat Fahey. Yeah. Oh, tons.
Yeah, you can break those open.
Yeah, well,
now.
any moment now. those were so good. And it was funny. We went to Thierry, and I was talking to him about Saison because more so maybe like 5 or 10 years ago, there was like two styles of Saison. There was the Belgian Saison, which was based on the DuPont yeast, and then there was the French Saison, which was based on the Thierry yeast. So we were asking him about the origins of his beer, and he was talking about how he went to brewing school in Belgium and that it was just a yeast that they had banked that he liked and that they use, and that he still, gets from them every once in a while. He'll do like 15 generations. So I just thought it was funny that, this to home brewers and to, the BJCP and this difference between Belgian Saisons and French Saisons. I mean, they're all Belgian Saisons, just a Belgian yeast. So I don't know. I'm sure some people out there kind of will find that somewhat humorous. That because it's all just garbage. It's all BS. When you start like traveling and seeing this is the second example of it where I was like, oh, so all this stuff that I've been, people saying like, oh, it's got this French Saison thing. It's like, no, it's just a Saison. It's also from Belgium. The yeast came from a Belgian brewing school. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I also, there's a bunch of other things where I think us Americans like to categorize things that don't really exist. So I found that a little bit humorous. The other thing that we were drinking that I enjoyed is we had a scratch event at the tap room last night at the store, which was really cool. So the folks from Scratch came up and dropped off some beer, and that was really fun. So, in fact, I brought one of them here tonight. I brought their bark beer. So it's got 4 different types of bark in it: cherry bark and maple bark and birch bark and oak bark, I believe. So it's very good. So I've been enjoying that as well, personally. Are we ready? Can we do it now? Yeah, why don't we do it now, Jamie? Why don't we take a break and for maybe, a minute and a half, talk about some of the other shows on WLPN that you guys can listen to and enjoy, and then we'll be back with more of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. And we're back with the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I'm telling you, this professional attitude, Jamie, I don't appreciate it. It throws me off my game. I want stuff to be all messed up, so then it looks like I'm the one who... thank you. That's what I want. I want Carl to be hitting mics with bottles of Scratch. You're not allowed to pour it on that table. You know that.
Wouldn't dream of it.
Yeah. But anyway, welcome back, guys. I am here with a full house. We've got Brian Roth. We've got Carl Clockers, Gabriel, Doug, and Edmar. Almost all of these people were invited onto the show. Anyway, let's get right to it. Our first topic, and I've kind of got more kind of general topics, less topicality, stuff like that. I wanted to change it up a little bit. Nothing to do that it seemed to be a slow news week, but, we'll just go on with that. So what I had noticed lately, and we've talked about it more and more on the show, is essentially this trend where it seems like, it's gone beyond seasonality, where it's just like this constant whirring rotation of beers that are coming out is just a trend. It's happening more and more. I just, when I saw what kind of wanted me to bring it up on the show was when I saw that Sierra Nevada is putting out a hazy IPA, and I was like, okay, all right. So it's on. This is a brewery that probably took 20 years to put out an IPA. That was a big deal when Torpedo came out. And now, just a few years later, or maybe, 5 years later, they're doing, well, I guess that's a while. But.
So are Sam Adams and New Belgium.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the thing. There had been a whole bunch of people doing this, and I mean, I think New Belgium is a great example of one who was kind of very much in a certain they were going a certain direction. They were very Belgium focused and kind of broad within that, and they did some pilsners as well. But now they seem very all over the place. I mean, they're open to doing whatever, you know.
New Belgium.
Yeah, New Belgium for sure. So I was curious if I'm always curious if this is, you know, that thing where brewers just brew what they want to brew, or is it that they're just being reactionary to what the market is going, and is it because of their size that they have to do these things? And I just wanted to kind of talk about it because it seems like these bigger breweries are the ones that are doing it more. The little guys are also doing it, but they've started doing it, so you don't know if it's hard to say whether they are not doing what they originally intended to do or not. I mean, this is all very speculative, obviously, but...
Well, a lot of the little guys are, like the littlest, newest guys are former fans who fell in love with those styles and wanted to brew these latest and greatest, if we're talking about IPAs specifically.
Or whatever, yeah.
But like a lot of these new small ones are, I know of some local ones here that like those were the drinkers and traders of beers, you know, 3 years ago and followed their dream to start a new brewery. So there's like certainly the smaller, the more often authentic doing of these beers. It is. But I think you hit it when you said, are some of these large ones, is it driven by their size? And I would say with the ones you're naming off, I'd say that has a big thing to do with it, that they're more likely to, at that size, to try to stay from their numbers dipping, that they might kind of feel a little forced to do something like that.
But you don't see like Goose Island doing that sort of thing, do you? I mean, are they going to be canning a hazy IPA? You don't. I mean, they didn't.
How big is Goose compared to a New Belgium or a Stone or something like that? I would be really interested in knowing, like, where's the line where you're officially big enough to where you need to start going where the drinkers are instead of being where the drinkers come to. You know, like what's the number, what's the barrel limit, or what's the employee count where all of a sudden you need to start kind of changing your headset from this is what I want to make and people can come drink it to I need X number of dollars or barrels in order to support this organization that I have now, and here's what people are going to drink to accomplish that.
I think that's a brewery by brewery scenario. I mean, that can happen at 2,000 barrels, or it can happen at 200,000 barrels. I think it's very dependent on a brewery circumstance and what they need in order to, when need becomes more important than want or choice.
And I mean, do you look at it as this is kind of like a need thing, as to try to
speaking about the breweries that you mentioned?
Yeah.
I think those breweries specifically are always trying to maintain relevance and making sure that their identity isn't separate from the identity that the most energetic beer fans of now, what they think about. So I think there's a little bit of that. But I also think it's fair to say that whether it be New Belgium or Sierra Nevada or Half Acre, or really any brewery, that there's a personal or professional evolution that's taking place. These are old businesses. Sierra's been around for a lot of years now, and I think it can come from some backroom marketing choice, but these are also humans and beer fans themselves, and we're all sort of like getting turned on and awakened to new things at all times. So there can be a darkness to it, but there can also just be these people are getting turned on to new beers as well, and are also brewers, and brewers want to try new things and experiment with what's happening in the moment.
I think that's an important point on the employees of these companies. Like, I guarantee you there's Sam Adams in New Belgium and Sierra Nevada employees that are going around to the local breweries, the small ones in their area, and tasting these beers and saying, wow, that is
I'd love
really
to do that.
That is really good. I wish we had one of these. And then the chatter starts, and then, it can still even at that size, like that's how new ideas and new beers can still come about. So I don't think it's always fair to say, oh, they're just chasing the volume there, or they need to stay above board here and there, so they're going to put out this hazy beer. But I don't think that's always fair to them.
No, I mean, I think there's probably a middle ground to it. I mean, I think that people are trying these beers and want to brew these beers. But at this, I don't want to. I can play devil's advocate plenty. But I mean, there's probably a lot of styles that people do that with. And it. What do you think, Brian? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I actually just had this conversation recently, and it was kind of spurred by the idea of craft beer growth, and that's always, the big number is that for years the Brewers Association kind of hung their hat on as a sign of a success for their kind of portion of the industry. And I know Bart Watson has talked about this often, where if you look at growth from a percentage standpoint, it may not look that great, say last year over single digits, but if you kind of chop off the biggest guys under the Brewers Association's definition of craft, it's actually really healthy, and it goes back to that double digit, and it does come from this challenge of kind of the changing force of the industry, where these national brands and large regional brands are competing very directly and in new ways with more localized options. So, Sierra is doing their hazy IPA. Sam Adams is going to have one to start 2018. New Belgium is going to have one to start 2018. And, part of it is just recognizing where that line is between creativity and what the reality is for a business, too. I mean, Founders found all the IPA, and that worked for them, and that's helping to spur some of their other innovation. And, Firestone Walker, which I don't think anybody would knock for a lack of inspiration and creativity, just talking about the Laconic Distortion series, 805 has been nothing short of a blockbuster for them, taking up, 2/3 of their production now to sell in a handful of states. And so sometimes it's recognizing, where those successes can be and how they can benefit you in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's just interesting how the general approach, at least from just watch as a retailer and seeing what's being pitched to me or sold to me, has changed so much in recent years, where you would used to have like you would have an idea of what someone's like brew schedule was. You'd have these year-round beers, and then you'd have these seasonal beers, and it was, even if you had a lot of them, like Three Floyds had a lot of seasonal beers, but they had 4 6-packs, and then every month they had one bomber. So this month it was this, and this month it was that, and it's just how it's gone. And it seems that that's just kind of been exploded, in that it's just so it was so outrageous when Pipeworks first came onto the scene in Chicago, and like every week they had a new beer. And now that's become more the norm than you have one new beer a month, at least at the small level, I think. I mean, it's just people are just throwing stuff out all the time, the littlest guys. And I mean, do you think it's fair to say that it's are some of the larger guys playing pickup or catch up rather to that? Are they trying to have more? Do you think, is there a pressure for you guys at Rev, maybe, Doug, to put out new stuff? Like, okay, well, what's maybe not new for the first time ever, but something that wasn't available last month needs to now be available this month?
No, I mean, a big concern is always the distributors and how many different SKUs you're giving them to focus on. So if anything, it would be having too many is more of a problem. But the biggest, I think the most important thing when you're at that size, when you're working with a distributor, it can be different if you're a self-distributing brewery, but having everything really well planned out and not being last minute with these rotational beers. You can't just show up and let them know a week before that you're about to give them X number of cases of this beer. It's got to, for that to be successful at that scale, you have to be like way ahead of it on these. So no, I don't really see the pressure for more new. No.
Cool. No, I mean that's fine. How many has the number of beers that you guys put out per year been increasing or been steady? Or
yeah, definitely. Like I'd say this year, it's more. Most of the growth has been in new package sizes. That's getting us into different places. Like most recently, we have our first 19.2 Tallboy can. So that kind of opens the door to like gas stations, convenience, like 7-Eleven, Speedway type places. So that's just like getting into a new part of the store that we've never been in, and then 12 packs was something new last year. So like, yeah, there's been new items, but not
mainly
like
packaging,
not like another 6-pack next to our already existing 5 that we already have kind of out there year round.
Right. Or I and maybe it's just with these little guys, which I think is more. They take up the bulk of the space in like spots like that I live in, my little shop, where it's the frequency of it is more. So you're going to see a beer for 1 week, and then it's not there again, but it's replaced with something else from the same brewery, and it's just ripping through. I mean, Ed, you guys are closer to that, I think, than certainly Rev would be.
Yeah, in the past few years, we did have a bunch of regular beers that we would put out periodically, if not seasonally. We don't have. I can't even foresee the time when we would think about different formats, like a 19.2 ounce can next to our 4-pack, or 12-pack, or 11-pack.
Painting a Jungle Boogie and a Speedway, then.
Yeah. Well, we're just going to leave cans on the curb next to each gas pump. But one of the things that you brought up earlier was the Pipeworks having that SKU come out every month or every week, right? And I think a lot of small breweries in Chicagoland, at least, have adopted that kind of approach for sales. I think it maybe doesn't work as well as it used to, but there's a lot more competition, and people are trying to ride some of these trends and also provide some more reasons for you, Chris, and other retailers to purchase their beer. So that's a very common thing for small breweries to do, to come up with a bunch of one-offs or have a very limited release schedule, and you can't predict what's going to be happening in the future. When a brewery does get to the point where they're able to change their formats and their sizes and think about different places in the store to place their beer, they don't want to have a lot of different SKUs. As Doug mentioned, you want to keep your 5 or 6 main beers on the shelf selling, and you don't want to even compete with your own beer, I would imagine. But I think what you're seeing, Chris, these new breweries starting up that even Doug has mentioned, going for the haze craze or the adjunct stout freak out, those are beers that have a little bit of glam and a little glitz and sizzle to them. And when they're
Sizzle and
released,
pop, baby.
people want to try them. I mean, I think it's just a regular strategy a small brewer would make right now. I think it's nothing new. When IPAs were a big deal, when people wanted to have mosaic hops,
Well, I think it is
people
kind
wanted
of
to
new.
have.
I think overall it is. Well,
really.
like, so when I was in, for example, when I was in Belgium, there were a couple brewers who were talking to, or people associated with breweries, who mentioned to me that how their American importers, specifically the American importers, were telling them that they needed to do specialty versions, special one-offs, special stuff, that the American crowd wants special, rare things. And they're asking me, like, what do you think about that? And I was talking, for example, someone from Valdu, which is an Abbey-based brewery, which has just been making like their stuff for forever, and is doing just fine and is very happy and making these classic beers, but is going to be doing some interesting stuff for the U.S. market because imports are declining here, and it seemed very foreign to this person. But he was like, "Yeah, I just keep hearing that the Americans want specialty stuff all the time and new things every year, and
we really have been trained to expect new." Fresh, new. From a consumer standpoint, it really is almost you can't kind of not when you're a young brewery, I feel like, because a new beer gives the people that already like you a new reason to talk about your beer, a new reason to come back in and try that new beer, and like. I feel like when you're new, when you're starting out, you have this explosion of energy. You want to make everything and you want to try everything and do everything. And a lot of that is very much in the vein of Pipeworks, where it's like, we're just going to do everything possible we can, as opposed to, there was a time somewhere around, 2007, 2010, when you could come out with just a Gossamer and an Over Ale and a Daisy Cutter, and people would be thrilled, and you guys really built your brewery on the backs of those three beers, I feel like. But when did you guys start to stretch your legs in that way?
I mean, even really as soon as we had a store, we started to do special release beers out of that store, bomber bottles mainly. And I think this conversation ties into a little bit of like, what are your outlets? So, like, for us, we do year-round beers, we do seasonal beers, and we approach the quote-unquote market a specific way, or a way that we feel works best for us. And then we have a store, and then we have 2 tap rooms. And all those 3 things deserve their own sort of circumstance and way of thinking. So, like, in the store, we'll release new beers pretty much every week. And that's appropriate and works well for the market. We don't do that because it's confusing, and we do have new things coming out on a regular basis. But we try to be thoughtful about it and not overwhelm people and make things frankly more confusing for ourselves. But I think in general, when thinking about the modern beer drinker, it's like a systematic approach to anything is they don't want to think about that. I think
they don't want to think about what?
Systems, a plan. I think what's nice about brewing today in the mind of beer drinkers is creativity above all, spontaneity, this sort of big thought moment, and the potential for something great to come at any time. And I don't think like the idea that, this seasonal comes out in 2 weeks is particularly riveting for.
It's not sexy at all.
It's not sexy, and I think that's like the name.
But you're also in manufacturing, so it's,
sure,
they don't go together necessarily very easily.
They don't, but I think people want obscurity and the idea that there's only 3 of them, and to feel like they're accessing something
special,
very special in that moment. And I get that. I mean, I do too.
I would actually. I feel like there's distinct separation in part of this conversation too, because and this gets back to often kind of where we are in terms of people who think very deeply and passionately about beer. That flagships in the actual defined kind of way really haven't gone away, and even if a brewery is still relying on one beer for a third to 40% of the production, that's still pretty strong, and the mass amount of consumers are still looking for kind of that old reliable. I mean, there's a reason why Leinenkugel Summer Shandy sells 700,000 barrels a year now, and their spin on that to kind of build off this example is that they do the seasonal variants of that to keep people thinking about shandy. So when Summer Shandy comes back around, which really is just kind of ridiculous that they're doing that many barrels,
That's amazing. They're doing 700,000 barrels of summer shandy.
Yeah, and that's for a 6-month time span. Too.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And that has grown steadily. Oh gosh, over the last 8 years, it's been available, widely released. And so it gets back again to this conversation that I know that I've had a lot, and I'm sure that you guys have had too, looking at it from the perspective of, who are the people who are really intensely thinking about beer and are really interested in what's new and what they can try and experience versus, the more average drinker who's just looking for something that's going to taste good. Seasonal beers as a category have been on decline for a while, but that's also paired with the fact that people can find pretty much any kind of beer, any style of the beer with any number of ingredients at any point during the year. So there is an incentive for sure to be a bit more adventurous in terms of the kind of beers that you're presenting and what you're releasing to the public. And if you're a new brewery, maybe that means too that you're doing that in order to find what that flagship is going to be. But I feel like it'd be hard-pressed to find more than kind of the anecdotal examples around the country of people, businesses, breweries that rely on not just a couple of beers, but everything is new all the time, and that's just the way it is for them.
Sure. I mean, right. Yeah. I mean, certainly, anecdotally, I don't have the data and the metrics to be able to prove it one way or another, but that's never stopped me from having an opinion. No, but don't you think that it's potentially, I mean, the case that the seasonals are also not as, they're declining because what made them, interesting to people was some of it, that the newness, the novelty of it, and that people said, oh, they like new, we're going to do more new. So like a seasonal now isn't new. That's old now. Like, oh, this is available for 2 months? Oh, okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, I'll tell my dad, thanks. Anyway, there's this, brewery-only release where, I got to line up for this $5 can. But I'm saying that in jest, but I do think that it was this mentality of seasonals being so hot. I remember there was, a long time ago, this, I think he was one of the, I won't name which brewery he was a rep for, but it was one of the big guys, and was talking to me about seasonal as if it were a style and how hot this seasonal style was, and was trying to inform me, it's like, seasonals, like people, really love seasonal beer. It's great. It's one of the hottest styles right now. And I think that, there's truth to that people wanted to, there was this newness, and maybe that is why it's declining. You're the numbers guy, Brian, so you need to write an article to prove me right.
So I think Gabe's point about thinking about it both package and place, and also the kind of product too, is really relevant.
Totally,
there is the differentiation there that I think really matters too, and the comment related to convenience store where those 19.2 ounce cans have really taken off over the course of last year, because that's kind of an unexplored space for craft beer sales. And so, the big guys have been rushing to get into those spaces. Green Flash dedicated a pretty intense push in California and Virginia to get their blonde ale in convenience stores, and New Belgium's going there, Sierra's there, and so it's kind of identifying, what's going to be right for where, and being a bit more targeted about the way you think about what you're producing and how you're producing it.
I'm gonna take the I'm gonna give that rep that you're talking about the benefit of the doubt, and I'm gonna take the devil's advocate position that says when that guy had that conversation with you about seasonal beer, I have a feeling that he's had that conversation with a lot of people that never thought that beer had a season, and never even stopped to consider that maybe there would be a beer that would not be available year round, and maybe those are the conversations that he's having nonstop. And
this was also
it's-
years ago, to be fair. Yeah.
And it's taken New Belgium and Stone and Sierra Nevada decades to get to the people, like all the people that are in this room, that are all about new and interesting and well crafted. And the scary thing is that might have been the easy part. The hard part might be what they're running up to right now, which is the rest of the country, the other 80% that's drinking Corona and Bud Light, and getting them to realize that, oh, there is this summer shandy. Why isn't it around all year? Oh, I can only have it for 6 months.
I better get it while the getting's good.
And slowly starting to get to that fact where, maybe some of us, that's where we've lived for so long that we can't even comprehend that other people don't see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious to see where it goes. It seems to be, the pace seems to be picking up. I would imagine it's fair to say that breweries generally are making more types of beer. They're making more brands, releasing more brands now than they were 2 years ago and 5 years ago. I mean, it's picking up. They're doing more. Where does it go? And at some point, is there a diminishing return on doing that? And if so, what's the end result? I doubt it's not going to reset to where we have four core.
Well, I
beers,
feel
and that's all
like
we make.
Brian, you might know what I'm talking about. Back me up if you saw this. I feel like I read something not too long ago where we finally saw our first drop in SKUs in a long time. Does that sound? Brian?
What was that, Ryan? What was that, Brian? Could you say that again? It sounded like you were saying meow. What was that?
It was a meow of support, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, meow. We're seeing that drop right meow.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was. 'Cause I think that the kind of the peak for this is tracked, say IRI SKUs. I know it broke 1,000 is kind of like the average number that were held by distributors, and I think it. Remembering correctly, I'm doing my best here. It dipped back below 1,000 sometime in the last year.
And IRI, so this is grocery, but could this be seen as grocery finally putting a cap to how much space, how much growth they're giving to craft versus how much is actually being made? Because IRI is like, it's grocery, right?
It's
more
grocery,
than
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's that.
I mean,
There's drug. IRI is also drug and convenience, and I think even is.
It's not capturing the
includes
SKU heavy
multi-chain.
part of
We're
our
like,
industry.
right,
Yeah.
and we're like Ed is dropping off next to the pumps at Speedway. There's not like a guy like putting a little check mark on a, right? Ed, was he there? Was there a guy in a lab coat there?
Not a guy that we understand what guy means, but little gnomes,
Right.
Beer gnomes come out,
Right.
and they just mark it on their chalkboard. They put a little hash mark on there.
Okay. So I was
It's
still
the
right.
GRI,
Not a guy.
the GRI.
I get it.
So to put it in perspective, I'm looking at the number now since I had it kicking around. This was the end of August. This is all retailers that were tracked for SKUs. It was a 3% drop. It was about 12,800. That was down from 13,200-ish at the end of 2016. So that's all the SKUs tracked in U.S. retailers.
Wait, it was down. I'm sorry. From what was it down?
It was down roughly 500 SKUs. But that's nationwide, and it's also putting it into context too about where those brands may be sold. Is that it's certainly not going to be a large portion of that number, but we're talking about maybe breweries that once sent their beer through distributor to a retail outlet. Maybe they're selling it on site now, or it's just being handled in a different way.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if there was that. If exactly. Sorry to interrupt.
You got a seventh
Brian.
guest on the show.
Yeah. I would be surprised if the drop in SKUs that IRI is capturing is because that stuff is now brewery
Yeah,
only
Yeah,
reward.
there is
It's
no
a
drop in
significant
SKUs.
portion of that.
It is like on a steep incline. If I had to
That's what it seems
bet
like to
my
me.
leg on it,
Yeah.
you know, I do all most of the naming for the beers, and I wade through whether or not we can use words, and like the words are gone. Like it is. There's a zillion new beers coming on to the scene every day.
There's also more breweries now as well, but yeah. I mean, where do you see it going, Gabriel? I mean,
Well, obviously, I've got no idea, but I do think there's some sort of reckoning that will come, which could be quiet and a process of leveling, and it could just be like a shake of reality that says, no, we all can't do this at the same time, and if we all want to keep doing this, we're going to have to find our channels and be okay with modest growth and be reasonable about this. But not everybody can, and I think I personally find comfort and safety in the idea that beer is not going anywhere. People love beer. We're on the radio talking about beer, which is amazing if you think about it. So I feel like beer is healthy and going to be at this level or greater as time moves forward. Who out of all of us gets to enjoy the space within it? I think will come down to who's got the biggest brain and cares the most and makes the coolest beer. And I do think right now and moving forward, it will be brewers that really focus and identify with making over selling. And I think that's a little bit about like the root of today's beer industry. And so yeah, that's what I think. I don't know if that's helpful, but
no, I mean, I think it's I think it shows. I've talked about, I think Half Acre has a very interesting approach to how you guys do it. I think you guys play the seasonal thing a little different than most. You almost like, I mean, with your IPAs, you cut it in 2 rather than in 4 or 6, right? I mean, you've got like your winter IPA and your summer IPA, and you start doing that with double IPAs too, and it gives people a little bit of each. It gives you that kind of like, I always know there's going to be a Half Acre IPA. There's some novelty or some like, oh, I'm glad it's gone away season again. And, Vallejo's back again. And you know that it's going to be back there again next year. It's not the drop where this is a one-time thing. I've never had it. Nobody's ever had it. But I have to get it because it's going to sell out. And then, give it 4.75 bottle caps so I can,
Get the badge.
trade it. Yeah. But, no, I mean, I think there has to be... I would like to see the leveling actually go in the direction of what you guys are doing. I promise I'm not blowing smoke. I've said this with you, not in the room. I don't see it being like a bubble where it's like everybody rejects newness, but I do think people are going to want stuff that they can somewhat regularly trust and get. And yeah, trust is both, honestly. Get and also trust that it's going to taste good, and if they've never had it, it's just such a gamble, especially when there's so many options out there. It's like, all right, there's a new beer from a brewery where, the last one I maybe got burned on, and there's so many, it's funny, I've said, rare isn't that rare. We were talking about that the other day, Doug, but like, hype isn't that rare now anymore. I mean, like, you can go into the bottle shop now and be like, all right, like, these are all hyped. So, like, I mean, really?
That wasn't the case 2 years ago.
No, I mean, it's kind of exploded. It's kind of got like a hockey stick thing going where it's just, I'm curious to see if it does go in that trajectory. Like, what would that I can't even comprehend what that would
the
look
rare
like.
has shifted, right? The rare now is at the brewery in a line. That's where
Yeah.
where rare lives now, and and where does that go? Do the lines get longer? Do they plateau, and do they begin to get shorter? And
I think that might start to level off too. I have to mention, listen to WLP and LP Chicago 105.5 FM. Sorry, Jamie. But and I've definitely felt that too. That rare is being pulled away from the bottle shops and towards the brewery direct releases. And I think that for the health of breweries, that's great. I mean, it's awesome for them to be selling it directly. I am curious how that is going to play out to I don't know, is it going to trickle down into overall growth when you have people going? You can only go to so many breweries. There's only so much time you have on a weekend to stand in line. So how many breweries can you experience and money to spend, but how many can you experience that way? How much? So it really becomes, I don't know, it's interesting. And then you're also in line. I'm imagining that when people are standing in line to get your beer or a beer at Half Acre, they get Big Hugs or whatever it is, or one of the, Death Stars or something like that, and then they get it and they maybe have a draft of it, and then they split. And do you think those people are coming back and getting a Fist City? Are they getting Daisy Cutter? And then I guess, are they doing it at the store as well? I don't know if that's changed at all, but
I mean, this is kind of like old thought, but something I still very much believe in is just what an impact like a 1% shift from big beer, macro beer to craft, what that does to the craft beer side, and how many small breweries a 1% shift can allow to open up. And
right.
It's staggering. It's like you could open, maybe Brian could give a better quote, but you could say like a 1% shift lets like 1,000 average size breweries open. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Just
Brian was talking about that. He said meow. I remember. Yeah.
But it seems like
I had that came up in a conversation I had with Bart Watson of the Brewers Association not that long ago. I wish I could remember the specific barrelage number, but we're talking a significant amount. And so even in the way that I think a lot of larger breweries are putting it in context too, it's not even just taking that amount of drinker retention away from macro beer, but other kinds of alcohol options as well. Is that if you're able to shift more attention toward beer in its realm of, experiences, whatever that may be, and where you're going that evening or that weekend, a small collection and percentage-wise, still a large number of choices, but that does make a very real shift in terms of, the amount of money or the kind of volume that could shift one way or the other.
Yeah, totally. I mean, craft is still, we talk about how much it's grown and how things are changed, but it's still by far the smallest if you break it out by macro is one thing or whatever you want to call that. Craft is another thing. Wine is another thing. Spirits is another thing. I mean, even a fraction of growth or from being taken away from any of those would be huge for craft. But don't forget, there is an armada of people, and they're coming after us.
Oh, great.
So put down your muskets.
One thing that I think has interested me as we've seen larger breweries pay a little bit more attention in terms of kind of a hub and spoke model. This has been seen with some of the larger breweries under AB InBev's umbrella, 10-barrel, Goose Island, obviously, in terms of having their kind of little brew pubs, but something that's a bit more front of mind with Melvin announcing this week that they've got their eye on a few different locations, that it's not just looking at it from the perspective of, okay, so what's new or hyped or rare that might get people excited who are really passionate about beer, but looking at it from the perspective of what are the experiences that are going to excite, the average beer drinker or maybe people who just don't drink beer at all to try to get involved to some degree with your business. And, plopping your brew pub down in a community is certainly a big way to try to do that, and we're seeing more places try to use that to their advantage. I was at Melvin's Brew Pub in Bellingham, Washington this fall, my first time in Bellingham, small town. There's literally a PC repair shop across the street from where Melvin's Brew Pub is. I was there, it was, 6 o'clock on a Wednesday or Thursday evening, and the place was going crazy.
Which one was it? Was it Wednesday or Thursday? Never mind. Go. Continue the story.
But I think the thing that I think attracts me in terms of the flip side of looking at it from kind of the beer enthusiast perspective is what is it that's going to get the average consumer interested in that idea of experience and authenticity and what that provides them in terms of keeping their interest. And that model is not for everybody, nor will it be, but finding ways as that kind of be your little, you might have your hub in one place, but having little outposts is certainly one way that we're seeing people look at it from a way of expanding their reach.
Well, get a little feedback there, Jamie. Good. See, I'm glad it's not all professional. No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, I think that people that obviously there's plenty of room to grow, and I think that there will be continued growth. I'm just curious to see in what direction it goes. I think it's fascinating to see how things have grown and how it's really been, as it probably always has been, it's kind of consumer driven, and that, breweries are trying to, obviously make what they want, but also give what people want to drink and where this direction is going. So it'll be interesting. In, maybe 5 more visits from Gabriel, we'll see where it's gone. It'll be fun.
But don't you think maybe like a bit of it is about now and moving forward is modesty, or that idea of modesty from the brewer's perspective, and the language of craft beer is grow, and what are you doing next, and what type of construction or expansion did you just do, and I think a little bit of it is figuring out how to tactfully and creatively pump the brakes and say we are good.
Do you think you're seeing that a little bit already, starting to see the inklings of that? Or?
I mean, I think there's a lot of different types of breweries out there, and I think some of the most energized breweries in our country are some of the smallest breweries in our country that are receiving a lot of the acclaim, the attention, and I think there's a little bit of, when we started, we'd meet a brewery. Good to meet you, blah, blah, blah. How much beer do you make? And there was like a muscle flex moment when they said, we make 60,000 barrels. And it's like, wow, that's a colossal amount of beer. Today, I would say there's a little bit of a muscle flex moment where like, we make 1,500 and we're good with that. I think there's some of that inverse thing happening in beer today. And we have great friends that like, they will flaunt that fact that we do this. We're going to keep doing this. We're going to stay small. We're going to maintain our line out in front of our brewery, and we're going to be exceedingly happy with that. And
I think Oxbow is a great example of somebody
Oxbow's
like that.
a phenomenal example of that. And our buddies from Tired Hands, and it's just
that's
like
the other one I was thinking of. Yeah,
or a Jester King. It's like, could they expand wildly? No doubt about it. But they are building their brewery on a focus on modesty. And I mean, they do great relative to the amount of beer that they make. And certainly the amount of attention they have is phenomenal. But they are going to ride their success via a lack of growth. Mm-hmm. And that's new, at least I think it's new.
I think it is too. And I've started to feel that almost as a pushback to, because there was this, I think people's eyes got really big when some of these buyouts were happening, and $1 billion and hundreds of millions of dollars, and people started thinking like, well, shoot, I mean, I don't know, I like hundreds of millions of dollars, and it seems really easy. That brewery's not that great, or or whatever. And some of them, were great, and some of them weren't great, and they were all seemed to be getting lots of money. And I think that there was then this. There just seemed to be a whole bunch of oxygen put onto a fire, and it's just like everyone just was expanding, or talking about it. At least it was the talk. You would go to like beer events, and I'm not even, I'm not on that side of it at all, but I just couldn't help but people talking about. They weren't talking about beer. They were talking about growth. They were talking about growing, expanding, how many barrels you're putting in, what system are you putting in. I remember people talking when you guys expanded, like guffawing at how small your expansion was. I distinctly remember that, and me being like, not knowing one from the other, but just knowing that I heard that. I don't know enough to know how much capacity that would have lent for, but people being like, whoa, they really missed that one. I distinctly remember hearing
but I
that.
think that and that statement right there or whatnot is sort of the crux of it. And yes, could we be in like 30 states right now, and could we have put in a 120 barrel brew house and all that sort of stuff? Like, no doubt about it. And we could be certainly more business forward than we are. But that's not a personal interest of ours. And not necessarily a professional one either, but I think what's being celebrated right now is not that, it's not, the nerdiest of beer consumers right now. It's just that's not what they're interested in, and frankly, it's not really what I'm interested in either as a consumer.
I think this is really one of the benefits of being in a country that now has 6,000 breweries.
I was just going to say the same thing.
It's not about. Big used to mean best, and
there can be both. There can be people who are making 600,000 barrels of a seasonal, and which are hot, by the way, and also people who make one barrel every 5 years, and that's because
and the more that people get to know beer on an individual, more local level, when you see that it can be done in a single place by a handful of people and they're perfectly happy with it. It's completely changed how everything's just in the last few years. I feel like I don't want to go so far as to say that it's people, kind of turning their backs on capitalism and greed is good and the bigger the better and you got to have the more money and all that sort of stuff. But it is nice. I think there's a certain slice of beer fan that really wants their brewer to be monastic and only in it for the best things that he can create and just what he wants to make. And it's nice that there's room for both.
Yeah, and it's funny.
I would actually jump on that. Not
jump on it.
Perhaps as not perhaps the quite hyperbole, but I would say that in a way, businesses have turned their backs on the traditional structure of what was success in terms of capitalism. This would be a very elongated conversation for another podcast they're recording altogether. But I think that you can look at kind of the way that businesses have changed since the recession and not looking at success in terms of percentage growth and percentage of profits, but rather just looking at it in a net perspective. So for a long time, people would look at a successful brewery based on, how fast you're growing, what's the size of your fermenters you're bringing in, what's the percentage of barrels that you're growing year to year. But I think you guys are right on the nose with it in terms of, realizing what happiness means. It doesn't necessarily mean in a business sense it has to be constant growth, and accepting that as a change in kind of the structure financially of what it means to be a good business in America. And so to be a small place that makes its owners happy, that makes its customers happy, that 1,500 barrels can certainly be enough to satisfy a handful of owners and provide enough profit to keep them happy and do what they want to do creatively. And really, ultimately, that's the driving force that they need to pay attention to the most, rather than, they're growing 20% year-to-year barrel production.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I, was in, I think, Carl, you were talking about, this monastic approach, and I was at an abbey brewery. I already
Literal
mentioned it,
monks.
Valdu, and it wasn't literally the monks brewing it, but, it had been an abbey that had been associated with beer for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they're talking about, these are one of the people who were talking about, how, their sales in America were down, and they didn't really have huge growth plans, maybe some, and I found myself being like worried that they're not growing, they don't have any expansion plans, they don't have this and that, and then I realized throughout the thing that like throughout my visit there, they were okay with it, they were in an okay place, they were just fine, and that was okay, and America being down was okay to them. And they're just going to do their thing, and that was all right. And I just kind of, what is it? Or what does Papazian?
Relax,
have a homebrew.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what I did. So it was a nice kind of. It was one of the favorite stops of mine in Belgium.
Quit thinking like an American, Chris.
Right. It was totally that, where they're just like, yeah. I mean, we're
cool.
We're okay. We're okay with that.
To give another side to the story of of motivations for growth, there's often a desire to grow to when you're small, the smaller you are, the more likely you are that you have employees who are doing 10 jobs, 10 different things, maybe 3 of which they're great at, 3 of which they're okay at but have no training in, and then 3 other that they're just the only person around who makes sense to even do something. And you're like, you just see all these people stretch thin, and you want to create more jobs, and B, let people be a little more focused on what they want to do, and not be trying to just pick up all these areas that maybe aren't a full-time job, but somebody has to do it for it to get done. And there's often a motivation to grow for that reason, to get a little bit bigger so that you can hire 5 more people so that this person doesn't have to do this anymore. There's a lot of that too, just to be fair. That has nothing to do with, greed or anything like that.
Right. I mean, I don't want to.
Just trying to get to a sustainable state,
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think anyone's saying that growth equals greed.
No, I know. I just wanted to give that side too.
Yeah. But in your case, you do grow because you are greedy, is what I was trying to say.
Me personally, yeah.
Yeah. Just you personally. And I'm talking about Rev. I'm just talking about you. You're just a greedy individual. And it's kind of anyway. Ed, I am shocked, and I mean this very sincerely, at how quiet you've been. You've just been sitting here listening.
Sharing a mic is one of the things that keeps me from speaking just out of turn.
Completely,
but also
not true.
I'm very
100%. That's a lie. Ed.
I'm listening to this conversation because one of my senseis in brewing is here, and I'm listening very carefully. Another expert in understanding numbers is also in the room, and one of our best authors in the Midwest is sitting here, and the man with the V-neck is on the cell phone. So to me, this is a learning experience. I mean, really, when we decided to get a brewery that had a larger system than our 5-barrel Psycho brew, and looking at what was happening in the market, it was like we had no pretensions or desires to make more than a couple thousand barrels of beer ever, right? And you've confirmed my half-baked plan and thoughts that that's all we needed to do was to create a kind of sustainable business model at that level and be very happy that we could even get there.
So you're talking to Gabriel when you said that.
Gabriel, especially, because he articulated the fact.
I was just saying to the people listening, it seemed to me like you were talking to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Gabriel is one of my senseis in brewing. He's a cat who said, "You know what, Edmar, just go for it." Maybe he was kidding.
I was not. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got gnomes on your side.
Right on, baby.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I'm not suggesting that growth is bad in any way. We are not a small brewery, right? I mean, we're not a colossal brewery, but we're not a small brewery either. And the points you make about staff and providing careers,
very important,
and longevity, and I can't tell you how much effort I put.
That's the most important thing. Is your staff happy? Is everyone not overworked?
Sure.
Can you build this business so it becomes your quality of life is great? I mean, that's the goal, I think, for any business. But I've been quiet because I've been listening and trying to remember everything that's been said here tonight. Because usually, as you know, my early onset of Alzheimer's is just everything just comes right through me like a hazy IPA, right? But also, I was trying to figure out what were the jokes they were saying in the background in the co-prosperity trio right now. So
I just heard like
I was actually kind of
what's
listening
the
to the
deal
comedy
with
Yeah.
corn nuts is all I heard. But
Oh, you heard corn nuts? I thought you heard big. I heard big butts.
Big butts.
What's the deal with big butts?
right, yeah, right.
But Chris, I could keep going. You know what? I mean, if you.
Why don't we take a break?
Oh,
in that
okay.
case?
Oh, okay. And that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah. I think it's
wait a
probably
minute,
for
did
the
you
best.
call me out just to introduce the break? I knew it.
Yeah, it's true. Guys, I think it's about time that we listen to some tunes, take a break. We're going to go listen to some comedy, perhaps, and then be back after that with more of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. Welcome back to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am your host, Chris Quinn, and I am joined by my guests, Brian Roth, Carl Clockers, Gabriel Magliaro, Doug Valicki, Edward Mars, and also Jamie Trecker.
Are you sure his cell phone's still plugged in?
I don't know. Let's see.
Let's check. I'm Brian.
Can you hear me meow? Can you hear me meow? Okay.
Oh,
Anyway.
we're good.
Okay, good. So we were, we went for
was a
a
marathon.
real long time. That was a marathon. We were almost done. So, why don't we just go to just kind of a fun topic that I was thinking about while I was in Belgium, kind of just going around and drinking lots of beer. It's definitely a different beer scene, and I think it's the most mature, crafty scene is in Belgium. There's definitely the pub scene and the traditional scene in Germany and in England, definitely. But in terms of like eclectic and different and eccentric beers, and also just a general respect for beer, not a respect for like drinking beer, but actually like what is going in. I think to me, Belgium has a different place than some of the other traditional brewing centers that kind of the U.S. has drawn inspiration from, which I would say is England, Germany, and Belgium. And even if I think stylistically we probably draw more from England and now maybe even Germany, I think culturally the U.S. has a lot in common with Belgium in some ways, but it's still quite different. I think Belgium is a much more mature market, and I was just kind of looking around and was just thinking, is this where the U.S. could end up kind of looking like somewhat? And I'm not talking about in 5 visits from you, Gabriel, but maybe in 30 visits from you, when my kids are hosting the show and your kid is the guest, and we're just nodding knowingly in the background, one of those deals. But it's interesting. So what do you guys think is kind of like a best case scenario for what things would look like here? What do you think a mature, healthy U.S. craft beer scene look like? Or even just, it doesn't even have to be craft, just where would you like to see this thing be at a much more mature state? I mean, the stuff that I noticed in Belgium that I thought was interesting was that generally there was like a pervasive respect for beer, even at places that weren't necessarily beer bars. They were just bars. People did stuff like cared about glassware. They cleaned the glassware. If they spilled some beer down the side of the glass, they would rinse the glass before they gave it to you. They
don't use shaker pints.
No. I mean, they go.
I
They
know
go
what
the
you're
other
talking about,
direction
though, yeah.
where everything has to be branded. There was definitely a robust bar culture there still, which I think is generally good for breweries, I would imagine. I also think that they were very emphatically domestic. Like, they drank Belgian beer. Even their macro stuff was Stella. It was Stella and Jupiler, which were Belgian beers, which I thought was kind of interesting. There was very little emphasis on novelty, on new beers. They just had the beers they liked, the styles they liked. They were very. It sounded like they were much more into brands than breweries as well. I think there were some newer breweries that were starting to make that a little bit different. De La Seine mainly. I also thought that the consumer preference tended towards beers that just happened to be more shelf stable. They had this bottle conditioning so that these beers weren't as volatile. So I thought it was ideal, not necessarily from a consumer standpoint, but from a supplier standpoint, where people wanted beers that were relatively stable, where you didn't have to worry about it being 30 days older than you ideally wanted it to be. If it went 6 months, it still was going to be absolutely fine because they were just more stable styles. I don't know. It was just interesting, and people drank a lot of beer there as well. So it seemed fairly ideal from a supplier standpoint.
I recognize a lot of what you're saying, and you've spent more time in Belgium than I have. I spent about 48 hours there about a year ago. But from the 48 hours that I spent in Brussels immediately after I left, like 24 hours after I left Brussels, I was at Oktoberfest. So I kind of saw those two extremes very much back to back. I think Brussels in Belgium has a great beer culture, but I don't know if it has a great drinking culture, which I think are two different things. I do think it is possible to be a little bit too reverent. I want to, I love the fact that when I was in Germany, it was just all about fun. And it was not about getting
Oktoberfest as well. Yeah,
yeah. I fully recognize that this is not like a total the best example of German bar or pub culture, but it did seem just like on an overall level that Germany doesn't get so hung up on the intricacies of things and just love to have fun, and they have their regional beers and they're happy with it. Whereas Brussels, Belgium, that world is the other side of the spectrum, and I am perfectly happy with the merging of it that we have at all of the places that I love to drink, where you can take it very seriously, but it is very largely about having a good time and being part of a community and having a place where you can hang out and talk about things and not super obsess over things, if that makes sense. I said, I recognize a lot of what you're saying. You go to the most touristy bar in Belgium, which I feel safe in saying is the Delirium Bar with 3 stories. Yeah. And they're very serious. Everything's branded. They're dipping your glass in the water to make sure that you're getting a clean glass. It is that style.
And that's fairly pervasive, that kind of presentation of the beer. More than that, I just was curious at where people wished or would like to see, or if they had a preference in where they would like to see things end up. Because it seemed like it was a pretty stable market. They didn't care about IPAs. They didn't care about New England IPAs. They didn't, because other parts of the world do care about that stuff.
I think one of the nicest elements in beer drinking communities like Belgium, Germany, is that the age of beer drinkers. I mean, old people drink beer here, but I think what we're doing right now is we're planting some pretty potent seeds for 80-year-old people that understand what hazy IPA is or whatever else. Kind of like music, like there's going to be 85-year-old people that went to Guar shows,
yeah.
like that's
encyclopedic, right?
And I think if I have a hope for the beer drinking future, it's that we see that generational communion around beer that I love about going to Europe. And it's like, it's just, there's children sitting with grandparents and everybody's enjoying the same beer together. And I feel like it's craft beer now in the States. It's a young person sport mostly.
And a sport is kind of the way it feels. It feels like a
It
hobby
does.
and a sport,
Yeah,
rather than just a way that
of being.
things are.
Yeah. So I hope we see that shift towards a way of being, and I think from just like a marketplace, like where's the business of beer going? Well, who knows? I don't know, obviously, but I feel like there's just like something else that's coming. There's just like a new model or a new way of doing business or another way of doing business that complements what is like we are going through something right now that hasn't happened in Belgium or it hasn't happened in Germany. So I think like we're headed towards this unknown future and I think there could be a big earthquake moment that just like even just all this beer being sold at breweries, it's just like it's very different than what we saw in the past. I think there's more things like that to come, a new way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what I think.
I think the connection to the source is super strong here in the States, and I like that. And the shelf stable thing, like I was saying, is great from a supplier side, but I could also certainly see it being like this of not terroir, but like of the moment. Like I want to drink something that is just very vibrant and fresh, and that's kind of what the American thing is maybe, and I want to drink it at the source and have a connection to it. I would love if that's, it wouldn't be great for me personally, but it would, professionally, but it would be great for me personally. But I would love if it kind of went there. But I tend to agree that I think there's probably a third way that it's going to end up going. But
my biggest want of where I want things to go is, and I hit on this a little bit when I explained the luponic distortion, what I was drinking lately, is just breweries trying to help educate consumers. And when doing events and planning, a beer series, like how I think there's a lot of craft beer consumers out there who want to learn more and want to understand more about what goes into this. And I'll give you an example of something that I pushed for that we did is, and sorry for the Revolution plug, but just we had a release party a week ago for a barrel-aged stout that we did called Very Special Death, our normal Death Star barrel-aged imperial stout. We let it go 2 years and put it in a can. The final can was a blend of 3 different kinds of barrels, and it was Woodford Reserve, Woodford Rye, and then I think the third was, I forget the third, it was a different spirit maker, but a bourbon barrel. And, to give that consumer, so those 3 blends of barrel treatment went into the final beer that went into the can. But for the release party, we had a single barrel origin version of each on tap, where just the Woodford bourbon version, the Woodford Rye, and just to give consumers that chance to buy a 5-ounce pour of each, try them literally side by side. So a lot of people were walking up, and we sold them in small pours because we knew people wouldn't want like this giant pour of all of these, but just that they could, get these small pours, try them side by side, and get to understand a little bit more about what went into that final blend. And I think people like that, and it gives them an idea of what the same beer in a rye
Concept
barrel
of
tastes
blending,
like.
maybe?
Yeah. And
is that education though? I mean,
I think so. Why not?
I think it's a cool experience. Yeah. I definitely, and not. I don't know. There's not time for that. What's up, Ed?
I want to say that you're looking at the future here in the room right now in terms of representatives of two breweries that made the Chicago beer scene what it is. What I like most about Revolution and Half Acre was how you helped transform your neighborhoods and made them neighborhoods that people wanted to live in. They wanted to walk to the brewery. Nobody
wanted to be in Lincoln Park or Lincoln Square until.
Well, I'm just saying that
I'm being a jerk. It's
these
what I
breweries also harken back to the past here in Chicago when there was a brewery in every neighborhood.
Yeah,
and I think the future is still that possibility that there was a small brewery in every neighborhood. You could walk to it. Or maybe you can't get a bucket of beer and bring it home, but who knows? We might serve buckets.
No, Half Acre is definitely an anchor to. I mean, how many breweries are there in that neighborhood now?
I don't know the answer to that.
There's
lots.
Yeah, but the thing is, their future is about the past in that particular sense, right? And I think it's pretty great. But also the education thing also comes to the very base thing that craft beer has been doing for a while. So, we're opening up in one of the first industrial parks in Chicago. We have a lot of city workers coming by our building over the past year, checking in with us, going, when are you going to open? When are you going to open? And we would always give them some of our beers, and they always turn to the lager we make, the sparkling lager, the Chug Life. And they're like, we want that Chug Life. Everybody wants the Chug Life. And what's going to happen is that we will be able to educate the kind of noobs into what we're doing with craft beer on the kind of adjunct lager front, and also introduce them to the weird stuff that we do, the experimental stuff that we do.
So next time Gabriel is on, you have to tell him how many people started, how many of these local people started on Chug Life, and what now they're drinking. Are they staying on Chug Life, or have they gravitated to something else?
Yeah, to Jungle Boogie or something.
That would be really, really fascinating.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
But you're right. Education is a super important thing because it'll expand our base of drinkers over time, for sure.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time. Is there anything you wanted to add to this, Brian? Or
Just real quick, just to get to maybe the root of the question in terms of American versus Belgian culture situation. That in America, the number of people who drink alcohol has pretty much consistently been between 60-65% for like 80 years. And so it's not so much, I think, about what it is, because there's all sorts of research that we could point to what people are drinking, but to think about it, perhaps how people are drinking their alcohol, in terms of having more interest in the experience and who the person is who's making it, their connection to both the liquid itself, the people who are involved. And I think that shows in all of the answers that people are giving right now. There's a little bit of pieces right there, and I think that's a big part of trying to draw that line between what's happening in America and also what you experienced in Belgium.
Well, Brian, we are pretty much out of time, so I'm just going to keep it with you. Is there anything you would like to say in closing? I want to thank you for coming on last minute. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the vivid description of the excessively deep V that you've been wearing tonight. Next time above the navel. The cut can go above the navel next time, I would say. It's a little bit of like a Borat level V. But anyway, anything you'd like to say in closing?
I just want to say congrats to Carl on that book. That's excellent. Really happy for you.
Appreciate it.
Congrats.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
There you go. Round of applause for Mr. Clockers.
I'll be at the Dovetail Holiday Market on Saturday with
All right.
them.
Cool.
In
Awesome.
hand.
All right. What a great segue as well. Well
I knew
done,
it. I had to
Mr.
jump
Roth.
on it. Thank you.
No, I mean, that was the assist. You just dunked it. I mean, he laid it up there. Gabriel, anything for you that you wanted to say?
I appreciate you having me on. I'll see you in 1 year and go see Carl at the Dovetail Holiday Market this weekend.
No calls to action. Come on, that's your second. No, 2 strikes. You're almost
No
out.
calls to action.
Doug, anything for you?
Tomorrow morning would be a good time for anybody listening live. A little bonus. Tomorrow morning would be a good time to...
No, something's happening if you want to do it. What is happening tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be putting a event on our website for a The Don't Drink Beer, the famous beer blogger, is going to be coming into town and doing
You heard it here first, folks.
doing a comedy show at the Revolution Brew Pub on January 13th,
Old DDB.
Saturday night, and it should be interesting. It's going to be barley wine centric, and we're pretty excited about it, and we're going to be posting the details.
He may show up on one of these shows.
It's
Who
possible.
knows? Ed, anything for you?
You got to interview that guy for us, please. Doug, Chris.
We'll see.
The Don't Drink Beer Man is an inspiration for our pastry boy that we just put out. So I'm very excited to hear he's going to be in Chicago. Yeah, I think coming up soon in our world is the second 39th annual
Craft Beer
Craft
Awards.
Beer Awards sometime in February, March. So look out for that.
Awesome. And for me, I don't have anything. Thanks to the Dust Brothers for co-hosting last week. Thanks to all of you guys. It sounds like we're going to be going on and off every other week. It's going to be the Dust show one week and then our show next week. So I will see you in 2 weeks. But thank you to all my guests, and thanks to you guys. And I will see you next week with more of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.